walk us through this process, I have distinguished panelists here, and I'll be calling them up shortly before we start. So I would like to call on Will Bradley, Consultant, Urban Livability and Mobility in Nigeria at the World Bank. Will, you're welcome. Please, let's make him welcome. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. And I also like to call on Mr. Doyin Adewola, Founder, CEO, Roomeo. Doyin, you're welcome to this conversation. Please, let's make him welcome. And then my third panelist would be Miss Comfort Booth, host the Talking Booth. Comfort, where are you? Please, let's make her welcome. All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for sparing some time to sit through this session. This is a really important topic, dear to my heart personally, but dear to everyone in the development sector, because every day, as a medical doctor, when I used to practice clinical medicine, you know, a patient comes to you in the clinic, and irrespective of what they're coming with, maybe a cold, fever, you can't really completely address their issues without having conversations about living standards. Yeah. And in having those conversations about living standards, you're going to be thinking about, so, for example, where do you cook? So, for example, if it's a 6-month-old child, you know, coming up with recurrent throat infections or chest infections, you want to find out about ventilation. Are they cooking at home? I mean, in Nigeria, we know one of the biggest issues with the face me, I face you crisis is the I pass my neighbor generators, because you have people living here, people living there, and all through the corridors you have generators. And why are we worried about that? We've seen a lot of people die from smoke inhalation in their sleeps. And then the noise. Sometimes you underestimate the impact of the noise. But also because our rural areas are not well developed, we have massive rural-urban migration that is now congesting the urban areas. And in all these conversations, we need to begin to ask ourselves about what solutions, what sort of conversations we have to have about affordable housing. If we don't, people are just going to continue to live in urban slums that contribute negatively, not just to their health, to their well-being. Sometimes you don't even think about the mental health implication of waking up, you know, with, you know, the roof has fallen, rain has come down on you, you have to bail water every day. So there are a lot of complex issues to have. Why are we bringing this conversation into this summit? The reason why we're doing that is because we're now looking at poverty as a multidimensional issue. So beyond income, we want to also look at all the other determinants: health, education, living standards, access to water, access to electricity. I'm not going to say more than this because I have an expert panel who would really help us think a bit deeply about some of the issues that I'm going to be raising today. So I'm going to start with Will. You've done a lot of work. I mean, and incidentally now, you're doing a lot of work in Abuja. Can you just start thoughts about how Abuja has evolved as a city? What sort of challenges you see in the light of, you know, some of the conversations we've been having, and what this has implications for, you know, urban poverty?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I just start by checking my own privilege, right? I'm a white man from the old colonial ruler here. I've only been in Abuja a year and a half, and cities all over the world tend to work better for people like me, and that's because they're mostly designed by people like me, and Abuja is no different. Put your hand up if you have ever held a copy of the Abuja Master Plan. Okay, 1, 2. It's quite a hard document to come by. I have held one copy, but I don't have my own hard copy. And I had a look through it last night, and this kind of exemplifies my point. The foreword says, "Dear Mr. Coco, International Planning Associates is herewith pleased to transmit the master plan for Abuja." And it goes on, signed sincerely, Abraham, Walter, and Thomas, 3 men. The members of the board of the FCDA, the Federal Capital Development Authority, it was 11 men and just 1 woman. The technical assessment panel listed on the front couple of pages, 14 men, not a single woman. And the international review panel is 4 men. So, you know, the gender issue is baked into, you know, the way that Abuja is and was designed. And, you know, when you look at the city dispassionately, Your Excellency, you know, you said you enjoy coming to this beautiful city, and the city centre is undoubtedly, you know, a beautiful place, particularly in the green rainy season. But most people can't afford to live in the city centre, and they live in increasingly distant satellite towns or in informal settlements dotted around the city. And the main response from those in charge has been to demolish. There's a crisis of demolition that has, you know, been going on in Abuja for nigh on 20 years. When it comes to transport in particular, you know, the band sung the Kiss Daniel song Gwagwalada just now. Gwagwalada is 55 kilometers from here, 55 kilometers. And there is barely a single public bus that you can get. The master plan had a pretty good public transport plan. It has not been delivered. And as well as we have demolition, we also have a political view of informal transport, that it is contributing to many of the city's problems. Okada drivers were banned because it was said that they were criminals. Kekes, many people who were given kekes as an unemployment program by the government then had their kekes removed. There's no damfos in Abuja like there are in Lagos. Imagine Lagos without damfos. Like, you can't. But that is, Abuja is Lagos without damfos. It's very, very hard to get around. And this has a particular impact on women. There is you know, a security crisis associated with taxis. You know, everyone is afraid of one-chance robberies. So yeah, I'll leave it there because I could go on. But yeah, there's some kind of deep gendered issues kind of very much baked into the design of the city and also how it's managed today.
Thank you, Will. Raised a lot of important points. You know, many people can't afford to be here at the center. They stay, you know, on the outskirts. But we really don't have a functional transport system. How do people come into the town? And then we also see that the available transport, which is, you know, taxis, we have a crisis of one-chance taxis in Abuja. And when we think deeply about all this, the woman is really still at the center of, you know, everything. She has to move goods to them from the market. She has to, how do people even transport goods in Abuja? And we wonder why things are expensive. I will turn over to Doyin now. Doyin, you build. And I know you're someone who is very passionate about affordable housing. Is it really achievable in the light of what we know people earn and purchasing power, access to opportunities for this? And also, if you could also reflect on how this affects, you know, different genders, when you now look at bringing collateral for loans and all that, but is affordable housing even possible in Nigeria? Are we there? Is that a conversation that we can start to have now? And please also speak about the transportation issue.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Dirisu. And I quite agree with Will, about the transportation challenges we have in Abuja. I think, yes, we have a great master plan, but we don't have access. All over the world, people don't live in the central business districts. They wake up in the morning, they take about 30 minutes commute to their work, and they take it back. So that's about an hour commute every day. But it's predictable, right? You get there by 6 a.m., the train or the bus is there, and you come back home about the same time. The challenge for us is that we need mass transit system, right? Because we have a lot of great satellite towns. We have Kuje, for instance, like Will said. Gwagwalada is just 55 minutes away from city center. That is not far at all. That's about 20, 25 minutes commute every day, right? But the problem we have is the standard of living in those environments are really poor, right? So there's no security, there's no access to water, the roads are bad, no healthcare system, no education. So everybody sort of comes to the city center because everyone deserves good standard of living. But let's leave that aside. Talking about affordable housing, I think it is possible. We just need to be a bit creative about the solutions, right? There are two factors, two C's we consider when it comes to affordable housing. The first is the cost factor. We have the land, we have the cost of materials, we have the cost of labor. In Nigeria, the only thing we have going for us is the cost of labor because of our population. We have so much supply such that we can have labor affordable. But land is really difficult to acquire because all of the land belongs to the government, right? And until we have policies, good policies, sound policies in place, we can't really tweak much about the land conversations in Nigeria, right? So what we have to play with is the cost of materials and also like the cost of labor. And the theme today is tagged, Face Me, I Face You. I think the problem with that type of architecture is the execution. I don't think there is anything wrong with the model itself, Face Me, I Face You, because all over the world, there is co-living. It's just a simple concept of co-living. I still lived in an environment in New York this year, a co-living environment where we shared basic resources. The problem with that architecture is the execution, where you don't have good ventilation, you don't have good planning, you don't have drainage, water, you don't have sanitation and hygiene considerations when you're executing the Face Me, I Face You concept. And we also need to know that Nigeria is not as rich as we portray it. Most of us want to have luxury, but we don't have money. In the UK, the average size of a bedroom is 3 meters by 3.5 meters. That's about 9, 10 square meters. But in Nigeria, you want to sell a product to someone, and the person is asking you for a 25 square meters size of a room, but you don't even have the money, right? We're talking about a UK environment that's got mortgage, that have a very productive environment, low unemployment, and mortgage is about single digits, about 2-3% you can get mortgage and pay for 30 years. But in Nigeria, where we don't have all of those factors, we want luxury. So we need to reevaluate our priorities, our expectations on housing. And going back to affordable living, you see most of these tech companies that have grown in the last 5-10 years have leveraged on the sharing economy. You see Uber, you see Airbnbs and the likes. Things are growing, so there's nothing wrong with sharing, right? But I think there's a lot of cultural constraints with the challenges. For me, when I get a piece of land, what I want to do is maximize it to the best, right? I'm not thinking about luxury. People ask me, Doyin, when are you building terraces, when are you building duplexes? There are a lot of people who don't have homes, so when I have a land that I bought for 50, 100 million naira, I can't afford to just build 2 homes. I want to max it out to have 12, 16 apartments there. But unfortunately, not many Nigerians are also embracing that kind of culture. So there is a need to orientate people, right? Education, awareness, that we're not as rich as we think. Because when you think about the multi-tenant kind of apartment, then you can begin to reduce costs. Another factor with cost reduction is the building materials. We need to embrace alternative use of materials. If you remember sometime around March this year where our currency was devalued, that easily translated into hike in construction materials. I was buying cement before then for 4,800 naira, but around March, April, it went to 11,000, 12,000 naira per bag. Reinforcement Y12, about 4,800, went to 13,000, and we still need to survive. So we need to move away from these materials that are heavily dependent on foreign exchange, right? And we have these materials in Nigeria. We have wood, we have bamboo, we have laterite. For laterite, we can use that for stabilized earth blocks, right? But what we find out happen in Nigeria is that we prefer to export our raw materials without refining them. Where the value comes in is in the refining, right? And that's the same problem we're having with our crude oil today. Because we have these raw materials, we prefer to sell and import. So most of the building materials are imported. That's very, very wrong, and that's where the problem is. So let's imagine the government is not even giving us land for building, because I believe the government should be giving us land directly, those who can develop. There are different metrics you can set in place and parameters to really check that these developers have capacity, but let's imagine that the government is not even doing great work. We ourselves must utilize the available and easily accessible construction materials. Stabilized earth blocks just needs a little bit of cement and a lot of laterite, and that gives you an eco-friendly property, right? People are using bamboo across the world. If you go to South Africa, you see bricks being used. Even in the UK, that is wealthy, they use bricks. But for us, we still think luxury. I think most of our challenges are around the cultural issues and values. I feel it is possible if we embrace this creative thinking in housing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doyin. You've highlighted a lot of important points. So there has to be kind of that culture shift in the way we think about owning homes, first of all. Maybe not a very big, maybe maximizing land to do a lot better. And then maybe also thinking about how to maximize cost or reduce the cost of building. Interesting. Thank you so much. Comfort. Let's come down to gender and inclusion. How do we imagine, we're looking at gender inclusive pathways for poverty reduction. First of all, can you just highlight how all this conversation that we've been having would impact on women, persons with disability, vulnerable groups? This concept of affordable housing, urban planning, transportation, I want you to kind of open us to see how, when we get into this dimension, what sort of disparities exist for vulnerable groups, and what sort of legal frameworks can be put in place to protect them and ensure that we are bridging these disparities as it relates to housing and basic infrastructure for living standards.
Thank you very much. There's a lot to say, and we've been saying quite a bit over the course of the 2 days. Gender disparity is at the heart of a lot of the issues that we face. And if we're going to be fair, it affects the men also. We have elevated the conversation to such a point now where, by and large, women have a lot more latitude to do what they want to do, how they want to do it, in comparison to maybe in the last 10, 15 years. The question is then, how are the women harnessing that newfound power and situating it within their problems for the next crop of women? I think for me that would be the first thing, because charity begins at home. Physician heal thyself. So women, you have new power. You are able to go out more. You are able to get, you are able to sit down at the table too and negotiate. We have a lot of women who are bank MDs. You're talking about you don't have access to money, but your fellow woman is the one sitting down there. So why really aren't you getting the money? Is it because you're not focused on your goal and we're facing vanity and living instead of building for the next generation of women, including us? So women, for me, would be the first thing. The second thing would be the fact that we are women. It's almost as if there's a target on your back once you're born as a woman. Simple. So already that reduces your chances. It already makes it a difficulty for you because you are a woman. The question for me with the intersection in the disparity is the question, what is the problem? Why is the woman viewed? Why is the female? Let me take it to the gender. Why is the female viewed as a problem? You, the man, came through a woman. There's no other way you can come. Okay, they put you inside test tube. Was it not her egg? Okay. They will still put her somewhere, put what do you call it, the combination, what do you call that thing now? When the sperm and egg meets, that thing. No, the name of the fertilization, there's a way they call it, when the two meet, that one. They will shall put it inside the woman. I'm going to be raw. That same woman that you claim you love, you like, that same auntie and all, will open her legs and give birth. She will yell. I have back problem. I don't have to tell you why I have it. And I'm going to live with it for the rest of my life. Yet every day I have to fight because I'm a woman. Why? Number 3 is democracy versus government. How? Our representatives. You told us that democracy, you, the men, it's you people in Greece some centuries ago, that democracy is meaning for rule of the people, for the people, by the people. We said, okay, you are leaders, we'll follow you. We go, whether it is by the ballot box or whatever, you are inside the National Assembly. Because you said you understand the language. You said you come from the land. You say you feel for the people. You understand it. Yet when you go there, I don't know what happens. We have to help them. What happens to them when they get there? Because when they were looking for this thing, they were on their knees. They were begging. They were in our houses every day. We gave them audience. We had the power. We said, we'll give it to you because all of us can go to the government and be asking for things. You know that women are the ones that need it because most of you are men in the place. Yet, once again, we have to fight. We have to beg. We have to cajole you. I attended a seminar where at the end of it, they told us that we needed to massage your ego, even in the 24th century, because in the 21st century, we have to keep massaging your ego because the only thing you have as a man is your ego, and that the woman has everything. So once your ego is emasculated and taken away from you, you have nothing. That's what I'm being told. I'm a lawyer. I went to school, the same school halls that men went to. Well, they say we should talk this in true, huh? Okay, I can go on, ba? Okay, thank you. I never finished. Let me check my notes. You know, old age has entered. Marital status. A woman goes to look for a piece of property. And I will talk even as a female. What is your business with who I'm sleeping with? What's your business? I came to rent house. I came to buy house. What has that got to do with the fact that I decently came? I said, please, I like this property. I have the money. I want to rent it. This is my profession. This is what I do. Maybe the idea is to make sure that the next circle of rent, I can pay it. Abi? You want to also make sure that you're not bringing a demon to live in to disturb people, isn't it? Why did you don't even look at anything that you said, where's your husband? I don't have. I don't want. What's the problem? Give me a house. So marital status. Okay, I have not finished. The housing schemes. In developed societies, you have, even though, yes, there's a decline in their methods now. I think in America, it's called the projects. In Britain, it's called council flats. But there's a system, there was something that they were doing to help this deficit and to help women especially, because a lot of the times it was the women who had issues and they made provision for them to live in these places. In our own, it would be the face you, I face me. Face you, I face me. I agree with what he said, that I don't think there's anything wrong with it, because even now we're having living situations where we are all co-sharing and all that. I think the issue goes beyond that. It's the issue of training. We are badly behaved. We are selfish. We are dirty. I don't want to live with that. I want to live in those developed societies. As human beings, they are self-developed. They know that they have to think of the next person Because if they think of the next person, it's a pay it forward.
Yeah.
Here, we only think of ourselves.
Yeah.
And we are only thinking in your own, myopic space. And that affects.
Yeah.
I think doctor wants to stop me, so I'll wait for her to give me another opportunity, then I'll continue. Thank you very much.
I mean, she's raised two important points. One of my colleagues in PIC, it took her a very long time to rent her apartment recently, because once she gets in there and they ask her if she's married, once she says no, that is the end. So she went on for months until she finally got a landlord who wasn't bothered about, her marital status. And the last point she also made about, being disciplined. So many times the reason why people can't explore, affordable housing also has to do with being able to, so many years ago, I made up my mind that I was never going to live in a flat arrangement anymore, because you would be the only one to pay for, the communal things like cleaning the facility. People just don't want to cooperate, and I don't know why. But if we really want to address, affordable housing and begin to think about cheaper ways of ensuring that people have decent living, these are conversations that we need to have. Because I want us to take questions. I'm going to do one last quick round in 1 minute. So, Will, from your experience, what sort of public-private partnerships can help with reflecting on new approaches for affordable housing and transportation in Nigeria?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the UK experience, and the UK experience on council housing, as we call it, is that it's always a fight, and it's a very political fight. And we had lots of council housing up until the 80s, and then it was unfortunately our first female prime minister who cancelled that program. But it's taken decades to fight, and it's a political choice to, any government has a certain amount of money in its budget, and it is a choice as how they spend it. At the moment, particularly in Abuja, not enough of that money, in experts' opinion, is being spent on affordable housing, hence why we have the situation here that we do. You talk about public-private partnerships. It's important to bring in the private sector, particularly when we know that state-led housing problems here have suffered all kinds of problems, but it has to be done in a very controlled and measured way. It's no good just giving land to private developers on the cheap because the government own it, and then collecting 30% of the profit, which is the current policy in Abuja, and not having any kind of policy that says you need to be bearing down on costs, you need to be using local materials, you need to make sure that the infrastructure is there, you need to be aiming at a target price. So you have these PPP housing developments that are selling at about 10 times what an affordable home would be. There's some really good work down in Ogun State where the state government did a lot of work to figure out, what is the price that our civil servants can afford for a decent house, and it was around 4 million. And then they worked, as my panelist was saying here, they worked really hard to get down the costs of the materials, to densify those settlements, to make it efficient. Something like that needs to happen in Abuja, because currently, the advert just outside here is selling a house for 50 million naira. That is just so astronomically out of the range of most people. It seems over the top to call it a crisis, but it really is a crisis, and it requires good people in state government and in the area councils to kind of come together and work with, not against, the poor, because currently the view is that you can demolish your way out of this crisis, and you can't.
Thank you so much, Will. Thank you. Doyin, you've talked a lot about, reducing cost of materials and, innovative ways of thinking about that. given the fact that we have a really big problem with building collapse, standards, what measures should be put in place as we reflect on this to ensure that we are also protecting people from harm,
Unfortunately, the only measure we have to put in place is self-regulation, right? Self-regulation. If I'm spending 200 million naira to build a house, I should be the last person that wants the house to collapse, not the person regulating me. So, but we have very warped values in Nigeria, and that's where it starts from. What do I gain when my building collapses, right? I always tell myself, I should be able to live in this house. So it starts with values. We need to reevaluate our values as people of Nigeria. Every time we point fingers at the president, at the people in government, but for you living in a face me and face you apartment, are you doing the right things, for instance? So I would say self-regulation, because no matter how much you get externally regulated, once you don't have that check within yourself, we won't get things right. But I also think that the regulators should leverage technology to reduce the issues of corruption, because that's also a big problem. I don't have to talk about that now, but what we realize is that the regulators are not so much interested in what they are supposed to check on site, but what they get afterwards. So beyond self-regulation, we want policies where we reduce as much human elements in these processes. For instance, in my first project, a simple information as knowing the land use acts for the land, for the property, which means, can I build 1, can I build 10, can I build 50? I had to ask 5 times in the same institution, and I got different responses. A simple website where I can put in my CFO and it generates the land use would have solved the problem. So technology takes away a lot of these corrupt practices. So those 2 things, self-regulation and leveraging technology to reduce corruption, will be the way forward. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. And then finally from you, Comfort, you've raised a few issues, especially I'm really, really passionate about this marital status issue. What sort of policy reforms would help to make access to housing more inclusive in Nigeria?
You had asked me about the legal framework, and I wanted to say that I don't even think that we need more policies, legal frameworks. Now I understand what it means, what gender neutral means. If we look at everybody as a human being, without whether it's a man or a woman, will it not apply to all of us? So all the legal frameworks that are in place now will apply to a woman. Abi? Housing for all. It didn't say housing for men. It said housing for all. Simple. So can we get you need to call them the politicians, the reps, the people who are at the helm of it, to be the ones to drive this. We can't keep on sitting here without them, quite frankly. They must come here, or we'll take it to them and be doing it in National Assembly. Because without that, honestly, we're still just speaking rhetorics. Can I still say one more thing?
Okay, let's get 1 or 2 quick questions. Okay.
Thank you. Really enlightening panel. My name is Francesca Oriri, and I'm the founder of Leading Ladies Africa. So I'd like to hear from the panelists your thoughts on something that has kept coming to me during the duration of this summit has been gender norms. Women are often at the tail end, or they suffer from gender and cultural norms. Now, what are your thoughts? Are there any specific things that we can do to walk around, eliminate, mitigate, or completely dismantle gender norms and how they negatively impact women when it comes to ownership, economic prosperity, and things like that? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just take all the questions together. Can we have the man at the back?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hayo Ade, and I work with Boping. I think the starting point is that we need to see shelter as a basic necessity. The standpoint of trying to push it over to the people, I mean, I think that is not fair. You know, having to see landlords and homeowners, you know, holding some stereotypical beliefs against the decency of a lady is something abnormal. And I think that has to stop. Questioning whether a lady is decent or not, that is something that should not even be a point for consideration in the first place. And I think there must be maybe a stringent measures against landlord taking such moves. I borrow an example from what was done in Ekiti. There should be like maybe gender office or something where these matters can be reported. And again, to the government, I want to say that government also has a responsibility to housing. How about social housing programs? Is that out of place for government to have that enabling environment for the people to afford houses? While I was living the other time, I saw a lady standing by the road for how many hours? So if she had to be living from that location down to the city center, she's vulnerable. That in itself will exacerbate the existing vulnerabilities. These are issues we need to talk about and come out with clear-cut actions. Now, in terms of housing, how about driving innovations? Every time we refer to United States, United Kingdom, what are those practical insights we can really put to work here? And not just having rhetorics. I think it's time to get to work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Savio Goldalapa. I work for Nigerian Institution of Surveyors. I'm a land surveyor. I want to ask a question to both on the legal aspect and land tenure security. What are those measures we could put in place to help the involvement of women on land security on informal settings? For instance, Abuja have AMAC. I'm exposed to the master plan, so I know what I'm talking about. Abuja has different kind of settlements where the AMAC has its own tenure system, and then we have the FCDA, where it's government inclined, and where the power of the governor, the state governor, has right over lands. How do we come up with policies that would help mitigate this land tenure insecurities that are against women? And secondly, too, how do we get to map and analyze data? Because I've not seen anywhere that there's any data or map that shows the direct disenfranchisement for women having to have land insecurities. We don't have such information, especially in Abuja. We don't have that information because most of the data Aegis gets is generalized. We don't have that kind of database. So how can, with technology, how do you advise that we could use to help improve data acquisitions on women involvement in land tenure insecurity? Thank you.
Thank you. This side, this man in front.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Dr. Unduka. I'm a senior research scholar with Cosmopolitan University in Abuja. I'm also with the Institute of Physics and Ecology. I'm a board member. I want to talk about what the gentleman said about materials and the cost of materials. You know the challenges we have in the energy industry and also in the food industry. That is what is driving the cost of materials. I want to also talk about what the gentleman said from World Bank. In every country, I'm not sure what country you're from, but I lived in the US, I lived in DC, Maryland, Virginia. I lived in London and Manchester too. In every country, you have this kind of situation where in the city center, it is always very expensive. You can't live in London Piccadilly if you're not making, or if you don't work for a hedge fund, or if you don't come from a wealthy or a family office, or if you don't work for one of the big banks, US banks. You can't live in downtown New York if you don't work for one of the big hedge funds, or if you're not in the entertainment industry or in the movie industry. So every country has its own dynamics. Nigeria is not different. Abuja is still, yes, Abuja is still one of the good places to live. I think what I'm trying to say is very simple. the gender situation in Nigeria is not just specific to one thing or another. It's specific to a lot of things in general. And I think when we're having these conversations about gender inclusion, we should try and bring as many men as possible to the table. The challenge we're having here is there is a lot of criticism of men and saying, oh, men are discriminating against women because, a woman wants to rent a house and you're asking her this question and that question. To be honest with you, if a woman doesn't pay you your rent in the second year of lease, and you go to the house to collect your rent, and she starts to throw tantrums at you, you always have to revert back to her husband to discuss with him. Sometimes it's always in a good... See, I've lived in different countries in the world. In the US and the UK, you have that challenge. So let's get men involved in this conversation, because sometimes there are complexities to these things. The way we bash out these things is not the best way to go about it. Thank you.
Thank you. So we run out of time. So in 30 seconds, just respond to any of the questions you have in 30 seconds. Starting from here.
Just to come back on that point, actually in London you can live in the city centre because there's council housing.
Sorry, please can we keep it down so we can hear the responses? Thank you.
So many governments ago, the state built and still owns and subsidises cheap housing in the city centre, and that is something that okay, look at what are the benefits of a very kind of powerful state government here? They own the land. They could, the FCT could build housing pretty much wherever they want if they wanted to, and we come back to this point about political will. So yes, every city has its own dynamics, but I think many people in this room would argue that the particular dynamics of Abuja are extremely exclusionary, and particularly for women.
Thank you.
So for me, I would say women should think more about ownership, right? Think ownership, ownership, ownership. Unfortunately, just like the land surveyor mentioned, we have a lot of issues around the land system in Nigeria. But for me, I personally don't do lands that don't have good title deeds, because that's your proof, you understand? The land is money as it is. So even if it means 50 or 100 of you are coming together to put money together, please focus on lands and properties that have good titles and think ownership. I think globally it's just about 15% of women that have property to their names. So one of the challenges we have in Africa is not just a housing problem, it's an economic problem. We are not as productive as we should be. So even if all the houses were available to be bought, we don't have money, you understand? So think about what can give you leverage, and that's by investing in property with good titles. And you can make micro investments as a group. So you need to prioritize, change your priorities. When you gather as a cooperative, as an organization, right, focus on the most important things. Ownership, you understand? The more women start to own properties, then it begins to change the narrative. So when women own properties, then I'm sure they wouldn't be denying other women from renting their properties. So I think ownership is the way to go. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Mr. DC, I want to tell you why that woman throws the tantrum. Her Excellency said when a woman is in charge or in a place where she has to protect her children, she'll do anything to make sure that they have a roof over their heads, water and all that. And that is why she throws the tantrum, because the man who is supposed to pay the rent has not paid the rent, and he has allowed this agent or landlord to come and embarrass her. That's why. Now, going on to the next one, you asked about gender and cultural norms, how to dismantle. We cannot totally dismantle gender and cultural norms, because there is a place for the female, there is a place for the male. We can't run away from that, no matter all the grammar we speak. However, we have to be human. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. Simple. That's literally it. Thank you.
What is good for the goose is good for the gander. Thank you so much for having us this afternoon. I want to thank my panelists. You can continue the conversation with them, as the day progresses. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. I think this session has been very interactive. We'll take pictures quickly. And, it just reminds me of the typical face me, I face you live.